boys and girls. I'm back with our chapter book tonight. And if you remember correctly, we are on chapter 6, which is 18 days before Christmas. And we finished with Lucy being all happy because somebody took her wish of helping her dog Valentine off of the angel tree and paid for all the medicine and everything to get her dog well. Do you see those dots on my face? It's from outside. And Cammie had just heard her grandma saying that she wished that she'd grow up and be more like her cousin, I think it was, right? Anyway, let's start. Chapter 6, 18 days until Christmas. The night Cammie overheard what her grandmother really thought of her violin. She'd lain awake in the quiet dark of her bedroom, restless and miserable. She thought about saying something to her grandmother, but she felt too hurt to even know where to begin. Then sometime around midnight she'd come to a decision. She was not going to be the fool of her family, the one who wasted time playing a silly instrument while Willa helped doctors find a cure for cancer and heart attacks and whatever other practical, helpful things she did at the hospital. The old Cammie who wasted hours practicing was gone, and a new Cammie was coming to town, a Cammie even more helpful and practical than Willa herself. That was sad though, because she loved her violin. It was just a question of making a few changes. The first step was the hardest, getting rid of her violin. But she'd done it. Saturday morning she had headed to the town pawn shop, Second Comings, violin in hand. When she'd entered the musty but cozy store, part of her had not believed that Yasmin Tennyson, who ran the shop, would actually take her violin. But after hesitating, the shop owner had agreed. In fact, that very afternoon, she had called Cammie to say that the violin had sold. Cammie was unprepared both for the sale and for the sickening feeling of regret that had flooded over her. But it had been too late to call things off. Now Cammie kept reminding herself that this was for the best. She had gone into the store and collected her money, using it to buy practical Willa, like gifts for her grandmother, She had gone into the store and collected her money, using it to buy practical Willa like gifts for her grandmother's Christmas presents. Now all she had to do was find a project, something truly spectacular, to show her grandma just how focused and helpful she was. That Sunday night, Cammie helped her grandmother prepare their dinner of pork chops, green beans, and fresh baked biscuits, and set the table without being asked. "My, you're a help tonight," her grandmother commented after they said grace. "I want to do more around the house," Cammie said. She figured if she wanted to be useful, her own home was a great place to start. Plus, she'd start to go slightly crazy sitting in her room alone, missing her violin. "That sounds lovely," Cammie's grandmother said, but Cammie noticed her frowning a bit as she passed Cammie the platter of pork chops. It was probably because Cammie wasn't exactly the best kitchen helper. Thanks to her, the beans were limp and overcooked and the biscuits had nearly burned, but she'd get better with practice, and her grandmother would be happy to have her help, so happy she might even want to boast about it to Aunt Aisha. "I didn't hear you practicing," her grandmother said, as she neatly sliced a section of pork chop into bite-sized chunks. The words cut into Cammie now that she knew her grandmother's true feelings about her violin. "I'm taking a bit of a break from violin," Cammie said. I want to focus on other things. She would wait until Christmas, when she had given her grandmother all the gifts she had bought, to tell her the violin was gone. Her grandmother's brow furrowed. "What other things?" she said. "Well, I want to bring my grades up," Cammie said. "See if I can get all A's. And maybe I'll start playing chess." Her grandmother was staring at her like an alien had taken over Cammie's body. "You? The girl who accidentally knocked the board off the table when your cousin tried to teach you to play? You play chess?" Well, this was not the reaction Cammie had been hoping for. "I am older now," she informed her grandmother. "I can see all the benefits of chess now." Her grandmother raised an eyebrow. "And just what would those benefits be?" Cammie couldn't think of a single positive thing about playing chess, but she was saved by the ringing phone and her grandmother heated indignation at telemarketers calling during the dinner hour. As her grandmother slammed the phone down and launched into a rant, Cammie's thoughts drifted back to the fact that she needed to find a way to do something really truly helpful, like Willa and the hospital. Something that would have her grandmother boasting to everyone in town about what a responsible, helpful granddaughter she had. Something better than limp green beans. Later that night, Cammie went down to kiss her grandmother before bed. She was peering at her email, her bifocals low on her nose. It always cracked Cammie up to see her old-fashioned grandmother at the computer, but her grandmother liked to keep current and was an active member of the church's online community and a regular at online mahjong. She was smiling as Cammie walked over. "I just heard the nicest thing," she said, clicking off the computer and taking off her glasses. "Do you remember how poor Julia Whittaker had decided she needed to find a new home for Pebbles because her arthritis was just too bad to take him out every day for walks?" Cammie must have missed that. To be honest, she often tuned things out because she was running through pieces of music in her head, but she nodded anyway, wondering if maybe she could offer to walk Pebbles. That would be fun, except for the cleaning up poop part. Well, her son put a wish up on the angel tree asking for a dog walker so that Julia could keep her dog, her grandmother said, and just a day later, a nice high school student came knocking on her door, ready to take old Pebbles out for a romp. He'd been hired permanently by one of the angels. "That's great," Cammie said, a little disappointed to lose her opportunity to help, though a little relieved, too. "That angel tree is a godsend," her grandmother said, standing up and stretching a little. "Whoever is behind it sure is something wonderful, did something wonderful for our town." "Remember how when I was little I thought Santa set it up? I believed that for years." Cammie twisted one of her braids around her fingers. "Who do you think it really is?" "Well, that's the mystery of it, isn't it?" her grandmother said, heading to the kitchen for her nightly cup of peppermint tea. "But there sure are a lot of people who would like to give him or her a hearty thanks." Cammie froze. That was it. That was what she could do to help. She could find the person who was behind the angel tree. Maybe she could get Max to help. And together they could arrange the biggest, best, town-wide thank you that had ever been. And that would have her grandmother bursting with pride. 17 days until Christmas. Joe was in a good mood as he headed down the hall of Pine River Middle School. The night before, Leon had allowed Joe to use his laptop for 3 hours. Joe had logged in immediately and spent the night playing online chess with Ariana, his closest friend from chess club back home in Virginia. They had IM'd a little too. That's a chat. But when she kept asking about his new friends and if he had joined the chess club at Pine River, which she mistakenly called his new home, Joe had put all his energy into the game. A group of jock guys ran past, one bumping hard enough against Joe to cause him to stumble back. The guy's friend high-fived him, just in case. Joe thought that it had been an accident. It wasn't an accident. Joe squared his shoulders and pulled his thoughts from the fun of the night before. Instead, he focused on getting down the hall without suffering any more bodily harm. Once he reached his locker, he pulled out his books for his morning class, then checked the cell phone that he kept in his pocket of his backpack, the one that was rarely used and only for emergencies. He expected to see the usual picture of him and his mom at Virginia Beach. That was his screensaver. But when the phone lit up, it showed that he had a message waiting. A cold sweat broke out on Joe's forehead as he stared at the screen. It was possible that this was nothing, a telemarketer or a wrong number, but there was a chance that this was the call Joe had been dreading, confirming the fear that had hung over him like a thick fog every day since his mother had left. This was how it was when one parent you had was a United States Marine, putting her life in danger every day to serve the country she loved. Joe's hands were shaking as he dialed his voicemail. His mother was in the Marines. "Hi, love, it's me." Joe let out a long sigh of relief at his mother's cheerful voice. "And I have the most wonderful news. You know how disappointed I was that we didn't have the money for me to come home for Christmas? I hated the thought of being apart on our favorite holiday. But the most amazing thing has happened. A miracle happened. I'm coming home for Christmas. An anonymous donor, something about an angel, called up the Marine travel office and made arrangements for me to fly straight to Pittsburgh. There's a rental car waiting in my name, and apparently the driver to Pine River is a quick 90 minutes north. So I'll be there before the clock strikes midnight on Christmas Eve." Her voice was choked up as she spoke the last words. "I'll be with you, my darling boy. We'll be together for Christmas." The message clicked off, and Joe blinked back tears. "The angel tree," he whispered. When he had tied his wish to celebrate Christmas with his mom to the tree a few days ago, he hadn't even allowed himself to hope that it might come true. But incredibly enough, it had. He would be together with his mother at Christmas, the one thing he wanted more than anything. His mother was right. It was a miracle, and the best Christmas present ever. "Hey, Joe," Cammie said, closing her locker and smiling at him. Joe looked at her and beamed, joy from the message shining across his face. Cammie stopped back looking shocked. "That's the first time you've ever smiled at me," she said. Joe realized it might be the first time he had smiled since he arrived at Pine River, and the first time he was thankful to be here, in a place where wishes really did come true. So, Lucy's wish for her dog came true, and Joe's wish for his mommy at Christmas came true. 17 days until Christmas, Chapter 8. Okay, class, let's settle down and get ready to see up close and personal the effects of global warming on the Antarctic penguin. Mr. Woodard gave Max a solemn nod. Max saluted, then flicked off the screen science classroom's lights. He saw Samira and Liz roll their eyes. Liz sank down in her seat, clearly ready to use the class movie time to take a nap. But she needn't have been worried about being bored. Max had seen to that. Mr. Woodard pressed play on the ancient class DVD player, then walked to the back of the room with his arms folded. Just to ensure the fun lasted as long as possible, Max made sure to push his chair out so it was blocking the aisle and Mr. Woodward's best path back to the DVD player. The screen at the front of the classroom was dark for a moment, and then instead of some depressing film about dying penguins, the screen was lit up with a bright title, The Miracle of Life. "It's a miracle," someone shouted. Energy coursed across the... I'm sorry, I can't see too good in this place. Energy coursed across the classroom. A group of guys cheered, and the girls shrieked and covered their faces as the DVD Max had grabbed from the 8th grade health class bin in the AV room began. Oh, he took a movie out of an 8th grade health class, and put it in there instead of about penguins. So I think he did something really bad. Mr. Woodward rushed towards the front of the classroom, but his foot caught on the edge of Max's chair, and he tripped. Uh-oh. "What do you know about reproduction?" a smiling nurse asked, staring into the camera. Several boys shouted responses at once as Mr. Woodard untangled his feet and finally made it to the DVD player. He hit the off button so hard the machine fell and crashed onto the floor. "Liz, get the lights," he shouted. Once Liz had flicked the lights on, Max could see that his teacher's face was red, and he was glaring straight at Max. He pointed to the door. "Principal, now," he snapped. Max didn't even bother protesting. After all, who but him would have thought to grab the DVD when the AV room was left open by mistake, and then get to class early enough to swap out the discs? The class began chanting his name as Max, in a blaze of glory, headed out the door. Max was shuffling books in his backpack when he heard his name later that afternoon. "Max, that was too funny," Samira called across the crowded hall. The final bell had rung and everyone was eager to get outside. Max grinned as Samira elbowed his way over, Liz following in her wake. "I thought Mr. Woodward was going to burst a blood vessel," Samira went on. "He was so mad," Liz agreed, giggling as she smoothed her long brown hair. A sliver of guilt jabbed Max at the memory of his teacher's dismay. Maybe he does have heart in him after all, huh? "Did you get in a lot of trouble?" Samira asked, her face a mask of concern, but her eyes lit up, eager for gory details. Max leaned across his locker, his eyes downcast. "Miss Sato didn't know what to do with me," he said with mock sadness. "I'm just a lost cause." In reality, Miss Sato had a lot of ideas what to do with Max, and none of them were particularly appealing. He'd been giving the usual detention, the call home to his parents, and a lecture about how his behavior impacted his learning as well as the people around him. "Do you think your parents really want to be hearing from me now?" Miss Sato had asked in her sharp, straightforward way. "No, ma'am," Max had said. Sitting in her office, Max had felt a little like a lost cause. Miss Sato was right. His parents were dealing with the loss of their house and the fact that their insurance wouldn't cover all the costs of a new house. They did not need calls about Max getting in trouble yet again. But this was who Max was. The kid who pulled off pranks and made the long school day more interesting. And standing here now, under the admiring gaze of Samira and Liz, It was impossible to imagine being anything else. "You guys, look!" The three of them turned to see Olivia, the third member of the girls' trio, rushing over, a big box in her arms. "What is that?" Liz asked. "My angel tree wish," Olivia crowed. "It came true already." "Wow, that was fast," Max said. Samira was frowning. "That's not your wish," she said. "Yeah, I thought you asked for a dress to wear to the Christmas gala," Liz agreed, eyeing the box. It looked to Max like it was perfectly capable of holding a dress, but the girls seemed certain it did not. "No, it's a million times better," Olivia explained, setting the box down and opening the top with a flourish. "It's a compact sewing machine." "No way," Samira squealed, clapping her hands together. Max stepped back as the three of them began shrieking in an alarming manner over the gift. But he didn't get why they were so excited. Olivia was the queen of do-it-yourself stuff, from the scarves and hats she crocheted to the tiny cupcakes she baked for birthdays. Max didn't know why you'd bother making a hat when you could just buy one. But the cupcakes were really good, and Olivia clearly liked making stuff. If there was anyone better suited to starting sewing her own clothes, Max couldn't think of who it was. That was the thing about the angel tree. The people who gave the gifts really knew the recipients and figured out the ultimate way to make the wish come true. So she had asked for a dress to wear to the Christmas gala, but whoever picked her wish thought they would get her a sewing machine, and then she could make all the dresses she wanted. For a second he thought of his own wish, but in the light of day he knew there was no way it would ever come true. He'd been dumb to put it up in the first place. "Look, there are even some patterns to get me started," Olivia said, holding up a pile of papers. The top one had measurements and lines that looked like high-level algebra to Max, but he glanced at it to be polite. It was copied from a book called Create the Dress, Create Yourself, which seemed like the stupidest title ever. The girls seemed unfazed by it, though, instead going on about styles and fit. Max tuned out and went back to piling books in his backpack. He was pretty sure he had everything, but still double-checked his homework organizer Zoe had given him at the beginning of the year. Sure enough, he'd forgotten his math book, so he rummaged around his locker for it, then stuffed it on top. "So, Max, where are you headed?" Samira asked as he slammed his locker door. "I have some stuff I need to do," he said. Only Cammie and his teachers knew Max went to tutoring 2 afternoons a week, and Max aimed to keep it that way. He slung it because, remember, he's not a good student. So he has a tutor. He slung his backpack over his shoulder and began walking down the hall with the 3 girls. "See you later, then," Liz said, as the 3 of them headed out into the icy afternoon. "See you," Max said. The girls were hugging their coats tight and hurrying down the sidewalk, but Max took his time walking into town. He loved Pine River winter. He found them refreshing, like pouring a cooler of ice water over his head after flag football practice. Plus, Max, like everyone else in town, loved Christmas and the lead up to it. Every Wednesday through Saturday night in December, town officials brought cocoa and hot cider to Dobbs Hill, where there was midnight sledding. Wow. It ended at 9, but 9 o'clock sledding didn't sound as cool, Max figured. And then there was the Christmas tradition of lighting a candle and placing it in the window as soon as the sun went down. Thinking of that now made Max's stomach hurt. The candle would not be the same in the grimy window of the crummy rental apartment his family was living in now. Oh yeah, his nose is itching. Max, how are you? Max turned and saw Alma Sanchez, her curly gray hair falling out of a red hat. Max's mom had been one of the nurses who had cared for Mrs. Sanchez's husband in the last few weeks of his life. After he died, Miss Sanchez had thrown a huge dinner party to thank all of the healthcare providers who had helped made her husband's last days as comfortable as possible. There had been a lot of teary toasts, which had made Max squirm, but the food had been great, and he knew Miss Sanchez's appreciation had meant a lot to his mom. "I'm okay, thanks," he said. She rested a leather-gloved hand on one of his cheeks. "Your family has been through a lot," she said, her eyes full of sympathy. "Please let me know if there's anything at all I can do to help." "Thanks," Max said. He could tell she really meant it, but it wasn't like he could ask her for what his family really needed. "We're okay. And keep warm in this weather," Miss Sanchez added, pulling her coat tight as she walked down the street. Max turned on Montgomery Street, then climbed up to the second story of the big brick building in the center of the block and knocked on Zoe's door. She opened it a moment later and ushered him in. Colored lights twinkled from the ceiling, and the mantel over the crackling fire was covered with fresh pine branches, a bright red ribbon in the middle. Her tree stood in front of the big bay window, sparkling with tinsel and gold and silver balls. Zoe went for simple and elegant with her tree, unlike Max's family, who had made new ornaments every year, so that last year's tree was practically buried under a covering of felt angels, sequined balls, and paper rings. This year his mom and Fiona had baked Play-Doh, candy canes, nutcrackers, and angels that the whole family had painted. But they never had a chance to hang them, because those, along with the rest of the ornaments, were gone, destroyed in the fire. The tree crammed into the corner of their rental was nearly bare, covered only with lights and colored balls a neighbor had given them. Max did all he could to avoid even looking at it, and he suspected that his parents and sisters felt the same. "How's it going?" Zoe asked Max, bringing him back into her cheery living room. "Oh, good," Max said. He walked over to the table in the corner that had 3 thick Christmas candles on it and began unpacking his school books. Zoe had been the tutor since 2nd grade, and this was the one place where he didn't have to come up with crazy pranks or witty remarks. Here he could just talk quietly with Zoe, get his work done, and enjoy feeling like a regular, normal kid. And as he began to tell Zoe about his day, leaving out the visit to Miss Sato's office, he realized what a relief that was. So, tonight we read chapters 6, 7, and 8, and tomorrow we'll read chapters 9, hopefully 10 and 11, at 16 days until Christmas. So, this is the angel tree. This is Yaya, and I've taken enough of your time tonight. I like this book. Remember, 2 wishes have already been granted. Let's see whose wish comes true next. Bye, guys. I love you.